Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bing Woodworks, the road from novice to pro and do-it-yourself DIY woodworking. This is going to be probably my favorite episode that I've done so far. We're going to be doing breadboard ends in detail. So that being said, there's numerous ways you can do it. I'm just going to show you the way that I like doing it. I've experimented with several different ways to do it, and this is what's most comfortable for me. First of all, you got to map out your table. You got to map out what's going to be waste. In other words, what you're going to cut away and never use. You got to map out what has to be right. It's good to have a game plan. If you need to, get a sheet of paper, chalkboard, whatever, write it on your hand. Put down the steps that you're going to do. Map it out and then follow the steps, because you get so focused on one thing it's easy to forget one other little detail. But anyways, we're going to get started. I got this table that I'm doing. It's made from white oak. Excited about working with the hardwood. I'm not working with pine 2x6s anymore, and we'll get started on it. Alright, so the first thing I'm doing is I'm mapping out my table. Now before I got to this point, I'd already mapped out the line that I want right here to be where my breadboard ends and my table meet. So everything from here this way is going to be waste. My table is 1.5 inches thick. Your breadboard you want to be about 2/3. So this is going to be mortise and tenon. We're going to be building the tenon. The breadboard end itself will have the mortise. So I need to make a cut that is 1/2 inch deep and get rid of 1/2 inch on each side, leaving 1/2 inch in the middle. How I like to do that is I'll run my circular saw. I don't have a track saw yet, but I got a track saw kit through Craig, this AccuCut. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It'll work for me until I can invest the money into a track saw. But before I get started with it, I'm going to make me a line. Got my combination square, got a 1/2 inch set out. I'm going to make me a line 1/2 inch deep on this table all the way across. Now I'm going to put my track on the very edge. I'm going to get my saw unplugged. It is not plugged in, and I'm going to test and make sure that my blade is not going to go below my line. I'm going to rotate it and look for that. Yep, it's just about where I want it. I want it just a hair above my line. That way, if there's any play, it won't go below it. Now remove the saw. I'm going to put the track exactly where I want it, and I'm going to put this track just on the line so that the saw blade will run on the waste side of the line. I can always inch it towards the line. I can't regrow the wood once it's cut. Right here? Right here? Like I said, there's a couple different ways you could do this. I could just put a rail right here, space for my router, and just run my router and just start running it, because that's where I'm going to end up. But I like this little cushion that I build to allow myself a mistake once I'm running my router. Now I have seen it done, and I've done it myself, where you just run that saw a couple dozen times, just scooting over about 1/4 inch, and then you just chip away the waste here. That works. It works fine. Me personally, I'm not that comfortable with it. I don't enjoy it. So this is the way I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to get my router set up. Alright, so I got my plunge router set up. Set up with a spiral cut up bit. I've already set my depth to where it won't go more than 1/2 inch. I've tested that against the line that I've drawn. I've got my vacuum set up to the built-in dust collection. I've got my dust collector just set up just for some extra added dust collection. These routers throw out a lot of dust. This board right here, this is my breadboard end. I've got it here to form a bridge on this plate that I have attached to my router. This plate will form a bridge so that the router can go between the table and the breadboard end, and I can just move along and cut out my waste. That's going to make this process go nice and smooth. Now, I'm not going to be able to do a 1/2 inch all at once. I'm going to have to make several passes until I get down to the 1/2 inch mark. All right, here we go. I just stopped what I was doing. I was starting to get a bunch of dust, and I'm getting close to my finish line. And when I'm there, I want to be real sure that I can see what I'm doing and that there's no chunks of wood, sawdust getting under my router plate and making it uneven. So I want it dead flat, dead even. Alright, so now I've made one pass, about half of what I need to cut out. I'm about to lower it the rest of the way, make the other pass. But, Doug, you haven't mentioned anything about tear out. What is tear out? Tear out is when you get to the end of it right here, and since the bit is turning this way, if the bit is turning this way, and you get to the very end of it, instead of making a clean cut like that, sometimes you can tear out a whole piece of it, a whole chunk of it. So that wasn't a good illustration, that sucked. But my point that I'm making is I don't have to worry about tear out because I made the table oversized. The table needs to be 4 feet wide. I got it about 4 feet 3 inches. So when I'm done with my breadboard ends, I'm going to trim up my breadboard ends and make a final cut on the table. And then I won't have to worry about tear out while I'm doing my routing. We'll have to worry about it when I do my cut. We'll get to that when we get there. Alright, so I've got the milling process done with my router. That router base, it was the first time for me to use it. It has a little bit more flex than I like. I'm going to have to do something and adjust that because it didn't make it as good as I would like it. It'll do. And that's one thing that you need to realize on this part of the build, just getting this waste out, making this tenon. The beautiful part about this is it does not have to be perfect. This is never going to be seen. If there's a little gouge here, or if there's a gouge there, or if you had some tear out somewhere in here, the breadboards are going to fit over this, and that's what you're going to have to worry about. So now that I've got the milling process done, now it's time to clean up this shoulder. This needs to be a perfect 90 degrees down here at this inside corner. Come in here and come in here. So what I'm talking about is right there. So the easiest way to clean this up, hammer and chisel. A good sharp chisel. I'm just going to chisel in from the top, chisel in from the side, clean it up. I like to have a little brush, get my chips out of the way so I can see what's going on. And when you're first looking at it, it can be difficult to see because everything's the same color and everything is the same shade. And depending on your lighting, it can be difficult to see. So a good little trick is to use a straight edge. Just run that straight edge along that corner, pressing down on your tenon and up against that shoulder. That'll show you if there's any little outlying errors that you need to correct. Just run that across the bottom there, and it becomes pretty evident where any of your corrections need to be made. So, that being said, let's get to it. Alright, so I've just about got this finished. I've cleaned it up, got the edges looking good. It's about where I want it. I've mapped it out, and I wanted to show you how I go about mapping it out. So I've already drawn with pencil and was going to show you that, but it really didn't show up very good, so I've put blue tape everywhere that I'm going to cut out the waste. And I think that will illustrate what I'm trying to explain a little better. I'm going to pick up the camera, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about and how I've gone about doing it. So hopefully it doesn't shake too much, bear with me. Alright, so we're making the mortise and tenon. This is going to be the tenon. All of these are tenons for each board. So what I've done is I'm going to come in from the edge of the table about 1 inch, and I'm going to make my final cut. So that's going to be waste there. From that point, I've come in another inch, and then I've started my shoulder. This shoulder is the same line here, shoulder here, and this is just 1 inch out all the way across. And then the opposite side is the same way. Got a 1 inch shoulder and then a 1 inch clean cut, I don't know what you call it, but I don't want the edge of my breadboard end to show the tenon. Some people do that, some people don't. That's a preference. Me personally, I like it to be clean. So, and then this part that's coming out, this is going to be my tenon. And remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. Right there, my mill work is not perfect. It's okay, it's not going to be seen. It's going to go in the mortise. It's going to be here, here, and here, and each board. And this is why I like for my tables that are going to have breadboard ends to have an odd number of boards. That way I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 boards. I have a middle board. 1, 2, 3, 4. So right here, this is going to be my anchor point. This tenon is going to get glue and it's going to be tight. So my mortise is going to be right up against it. When I do my mortise on these, I'm going to give it a little bit of room, 1/4 inch or so, maybe a little bit more on each side, so that it can move side to side. This shoulder will keep everything aligned all the way across, and then this will allow movement inside the breadboard end. So we'll also do the drawboard aspect of it, and I'll get to that when we get there, when we do our dowels. But how we go about doing it is my breadboard end is going to be 5.5 inches deep. So I want to do about 2/3 depth. So 2/3 of 5.5 is about 3.5 inches. So this is 3.5 inches deep all the way across. So everything you see in blue is going to be cut away in one fashion or another. And that's how you map out your mortise and tenon. When we get to the breadboard end itself, I'll show you how to replicate this and transfer it to the mortise. Alright, so that's my 3.5 inches right there. Everything else is waste. I guess if I'd have cut that off before, I wouldn't have had to do as much work, basically. Would have lessened the milling time that I had to do on my router. But this is just what I'm comfortable with. Might try that next time. Now I've got to cut out these notches here all the way across. A couple ways you can do that. You can use a jigsaw, just like I just did, and use it. Use a combination of coping saws or straight cutting saws. I usually like to use this cheap version of a Japanese saw that I have. Anytime that you're using any saw, regardless of what kind it is, you want to make sure that you're straight with it. You don't want to be at an angle either direction. And you can start off at an angle that's straight with your line, but as you get close to your end cut, you want to make sure that you're perfectly up and down. And when you first start off, it's going to want to jump off your line. Don't press too hard. Nice and light until you got a bite. As fancy as this saw may or may not be, I mean, you can use a bunch of different options. This is just a normal saw, no specialty to it. And I can do the same thing with it if I didn't have this Japanese cutting saw. So that's one way to get rid of the waste. Going to go all the way down to the face right here for 2 inches. Now this saw is designed to cut on a face. So it's reversible. So right here, I can't cut it that way. Move this just a little bit. Can't cut it that way, but press this little button right here, and it reverses. So now I have it going the other way. Put the flat of the saw against the face, and it should match up with the opposite face. And there I've got a pretty clean face right there. Got a little nick in there from this saw. I'll probably have to fill that in with wood filler. What I like to do is I usually use this saw to go in and do these lengthwise lines, and then when I cut across, I use my coping saw. But like I said, you can use a decent jigsaw. Make sure you got a good sharp blade on there, fine tooth. Now to use a coping saw, you can set this blade to be pointing whatever direction you want. You loosen up the handle, and now the blade can face straight. You can turn it to the right, you can turn it to the left, and just tighten up the handle again. It's holding that blade where you want it. So right now I've got it at roughly a 45-degree angle, and that gives me the freedom to get in these corners. So there's a couple different options of how you cut out your waste and you get your tenon cut to the measurements that you want.
Making breadboard ends is one of my favorite tasks in all the projects that I do. It's also one of the most stressful things that I do in all of my projects. If you plan out what you're doing and you double check what you're doing each step of the way, it really comes together and becomes something that you're extremely proud of. I'm very proud of these breadboard ends. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot by watching this and got something out of it. If you did, please hit the subscribe and the like button. Part 2 of this video, we're going to show how to make the mortise. That's the hollow breadboard that these tenons will go into. We'll put these two together. That'll complete the table. And I hope that anybody watching this has become more confident in doing it yourself. That's the whole purpose of why I'm doing these videos. I want to help you get better with your skills, and hopefully you can learn something from it. Thank you.